Pontiac. Summer of 1969, the muscle car war was reaching its absolute peak. Every Detroit automaker was chasing one thing: more horsepower, more speed, more glory. But hidden inside a handful of white and blue Firebirds was an engine so misunderstood that even today, most enthusiasts don't know what it was really capable of. People remember the Judge. They remember the CDO, they remember the Hemi, and the Boss 429. But what almost nobody knows is that Pontiac quietly built one of the most sophisticated high-performance V8s America had ever seen. And then barely anyone bought it. What happened next changed everything. You think you know the story of the 1969 Trans Am. Not like this. By the late 1960s, Pontiac wasn't just building cars, it was building a reputation. Under the leadership of legendary engineer John DeLorean, Pontiac had transformed from a conservative division into the performance brand of General Motors. DeLorean had joined Pontiac in 1956, and by 1965, at just 40 years old, he became the youngest division head in General Motors history. His vision was radical for the time. He believed performance sold cars, not just to racers, not just to enthusiasts, to everyone. He surrounded himself with engineers who thought the same way, men like Bill Collins and Russ G., who understood that the future of the automobile belonged to those brave enough to push boundaries. Together, they turned Pontiac's engineering department into something closer to a racing skunkworks than a corporate division. The GTO had ignited the muscle car revolution in 1964, proving Americans wanted lightweight intermediates with giant V8s stuffed under the hood. It was a simple formula: take a mid-size A-body platform, drop in a big block engine, strip away unnecessary weight, price it affordably. Suddenly, average buyers could experience acceleration that had previously required expensive sports cars or purpose-built hot rods. But by 1969, the competition had caught up. Chevrolet had the Camaro Z28, Ford had the Boss 302 and Mach 1. Chrysler unleashed the 426 Street Hemi. Plymouth countered with the Roadrunner and GTX. Dodge brought the Super Bee and Charger. Oldsmobile offered the 442. Even Buick, traditionally GM's luxury division, built the brutally fast GSX. Pontiac needed something that could stand toe-to-toe with the best. The answer arrived in the form of the first-generation Trans Am. It wasn't just another Firebird with stripes. It was a homologation-inspired performance machine carrying the name of America's most prestigious road racing series. Ironically, Pontiac had to pay the Sports Car Club of America a licensing fee for every car sold because Trans Am was already a registered racing trademark. That alone tells you how serious this project was. The Trans Am racing series itself had become wildly popular. Mark Donohue was dominating in Camaros. Parnelli Jones wheeled Boss Mustangs. The racing was fierce, close, and incredibly exciting. Pontiac wanted that halo effect. They wanted customers walking into dealerships thinking about Watkins Glen and Laguna Seca, not just stoplight drag races. But there was one option that separated the ordinary from the extraordinary. 4 simple words: Ram Air 4. At first glance, the Ram Air 4 looked similar to Pontiac's other 400 cubic inch engines. The displacement remained 400 cubic inches, or 6.6 liters. The bore measured 4.12 inches, while the stroke stayed at 3.75 inches. Yet almost every critical component had been redesigned. This wasn't simply a hotter camshaft or a bigger carburetor. Pontiac's engineers essentially created a race engine disguised as a production V8. The compression ratio jumped to a towering 10.75. 1. Massive round port cylinder heads dramatically improved airflow compared to the standard D-port heads. Giant 2.11-inch intake valves and 1.77-inch exhaust valves allowed the engine to breathe at high RPM like few American V8s of its day. To put that in perspective, those intake valves were larger than what many competitors used in their big block engines. The exhaust valves featured specially hardened seats designed to withstand sustained high RPM operation without recession or valve float. Underneath sat forged connecting rods, an incredibly strong nodular iron crankshaft, lightweight aluminum intake manifold, and one of Pontiac's most aggressive factory camshafts ever installed in a streetcar. The rods alone told the story. While standard Pontiac 400S used cast rods, the Ram Air 4 received forgings strong enough to handle repeated neutral drops and 7,000 revolutions per minute money shifts. These weren't parts chosen to meet a budget. They were chosen to survive abuse. The pistons received similar attention, forged aluminum construction with valve reliefs, carefully calculated to provide maximum compression while preventing catastrophic piston-to-valve contact. The engineering tolerance was razor thin. Rotate the camshaft timing by even a few degrees, and suddenly you risked destroying the engine. Pontiac's engineers knew exactly what they were doing. Officially, Pontiac rated the Ram Air 4 at 370 horsepower at 5,500 revolutions per minute and 445 pound-feet of torque at 3,900 revolutions per minute. Most people accepted those numbers. They shouldn't have. General Motors had an unofficial corporate policy limiting advertised horsepower. Insurance companies were watching. Regulators were watching. Rival manufacturers were watching. Many historians and engine builders now agree that the real output was much higher. Factory-fresh Ram Air 4 engines consistently produced between 410 and 430 gross horsepower in independent testing. In carefully tuned race trim with optimized ignition, headers, and open exhaust, many builders estimate outputs approaching 450 horsepower. Contemporary magazine tests supported these suspicions. Car and Driver tested a Ram Air 4 GTO and recorded acceleration times that simply didn't match the advertised power figures. Their test car hit 60 miles per hour in 5.5 seconds and covered the quarter mile in 13.6 seconds at 107 miles per hour. Those were supercar numbers. Ferrari and Lamborghini territory. From a production American V8 costing a fraction of an exotic European engine. And that was only the beginning. Unlike many big block rivals that produced mountains of torque but ran out of breath, the Ram Air 4 loved RPM. Its aggressive camshaft kept pulling well beyond 6,000 revolutions per minute, where lesser Pontiac engines began gasping for air. Most muscle car engines of the era made peak power around 5,000 to 5,500 revolutions per minute, then fell flat. The Ram Air 4 just kept climbing. Peak horsepower arrived at 5,500, but the engine continued producing usable power well beyond that. Smart drivers learned to shift at 6,200 revolutions per minute, extracting every possible second from each gear. Drivers often described it as having two personalities. Below 3,000 revolutions per minute, it felt almost lazy. Then the tack needle climbed past 3,500. Suddenly it exploded. But there was a problem. That famous camshaft created serious compromises. With 308 and 320 degrees of advertised duration and substantial valve overlap, idle quality became rough and unpredictable. Vacuum dropped so low that power brakes could become inconsistent. Cold starts required patience. Around town, some owners actually thought something was wrong with their brand new cars. Dealership service departments fielded complaints from confused buyers who expected smooth idle and effortless low-speed driving. Instead, they got an engine that loped like a race car, shook at stoplights, and occasionally popped through the exhaust. Pontiac included special instructions with every Ram Air 4, essentially telling owners this was normal behavior. It took a special kind of enthusiast to appreciate those quirks. Pontiac engineers knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't building comfort, they were building speed. Airflow became their obsession. Functional hood scoops directed cooler outside air toward the Quadrajet 4-barrel carburetor. Unlike decorative scoops found on many competitors, Pontiac's Ram Air system actually worked. Wind tunnel testing proved the design created positive pressure at highway speeds, forcing air into the carburetor against atmospheric pressure. Cooler air meant greater density. Greater density meant more oxygen entering the cylinders. More oxygen meant more fuel could be burned. And every extra combustion event translated directly into horsepower. Simple physics. Brutal results. The Quadrajet carburetor itself deserves recognition. Many enthusiasts dismissed it as a smog-era compromise compared to Holley's legendary 4-barrels. They were wrong. The Rochester Quadrajet featured small primary ventures for excellent fuel economy and drivability, combined with massive secondary bores that opened under heavy throttle. Once those secondaries swung open, the engine inhaled with a deep, menacing roar that became the Ram Air 4's signature sound. Inside the cylinder heads, engineers reshaped intake and exhaust ports into large round openings that flowed dramatically better than earlier Pontiac castings. Flow bench testing revealed numbers that embarrassed some purpose-built racing heads. The intake ports flowed over 270 cubic feet per minute at 28 inches of water. The exhaust ports moved nearly 200 CFM. Those were staggering figures for 1969 production castings. Racers quickly discovered these heads responded exceptionally well to careful port work. Combined with the free-flowing exhaust manifolds, the engine could inhale and exhale with remarkable efficiency for a production V8. Professional engine builders found that even minor cleanup work and bowl blending could unlock another 20 to 30 horsepower. Serious racing efforts with fully ported heads, competition valves, and optimized combustion chambers extracted well over 500 horsepower from naturally aspirated Ram Air 4 builds. Then came the bottom end. The forged rods and heavy-duty crankshaft weren't there by accident. High RPM creates enormous stress. At 6,200 revolutions per minute, each piston changes direction over 200 times every second. The loads placed on connecting rods become staggering. Lesser engines suffered stretched rod bolts, cracked pistons, or spun bearings. Pontiac reinforced the Ram Air 4 precisely because they expected owners to push it hard, and many did. In NHRA Superstock competition, Ram Air 4-powered Firebirds and GTOs quickly earned respect. Racers discovered that although the engine wasn't the easiest to launch, it became ferocious once the revs climbed. The high RPM power band meant drivers had to slip the clutch carefully or risk bogging off the line, but second and third gear became absolute weapons. Properly prepared examples routinely ran quarter-mile times in the low 13-second range straight from the showroom, while well-tuned race cars dipped into the high 11s at speeds exceeding 115 miles per hour. Those were serious numbers in 1969, especially for a naturally aspirated street engine. Professional drag racers like Arnie the Farmer Beswick campaigned Ram Air 4 Pontiacs with devastating effectiveness. His GTOs became giant killers, regularly beating big block Chevys and Hemis that theoretically held displacement and power advantages. The secret was keeping the Ram Air 4 in its sweet spot. Let it breathe above 4,000 revolutions per minute, and suddenly the sophisticated valve train and superior cylinder heads made the difference. But Pontiac's greatest enemy wasn't Ford, it wasn't Chevrolet, it wasn't Chrysler, it was paperwork. General Motors maintained a controversial ban on factory-backed racing beginning in 1963. The Automobile Manufacturers Association had agreed to withdraw from motorsports following safety concerns and bad publicity. Officially, Pontiac couldn't actively support motorsports. Unofficially, engineers still collaborated with racers through independent performance shops. Parts catalogs mysteriously contained components perfect for racing. Technical bulletins found their way to privateers. Engineers took personal vacation days that somehow aligned with major races. The result was a strange balancing act. Pontiac built engines clearly designed for competition while pretending they were simply enthusiastic street packages. Everyone knew the truth. Nobody said it publicly. The 1969 Trans Am itself became one of America's rarest muscle cars, almost by accident. Production totaled only 697 hardtops and 8 convertibles for the entire model year. Out of those, just 55 received the coveted Ram Air 4 engine. 55. Think about that for a second. While competitors built thousands of performance models, Pontiac created what was essentially an instant collector's item without even realizing it. Chevrolet produced over 20,000 Z28 Camaros that same year. Ford built nearly 2,000 Boss 302 Mustangs. Chrysler stamped out Hemi engines by the hundreds. Pontiac built 55 Ram Air 4 Trans Ams. Why so few? Price played a major role. The Trans Am package itself added significant cost over a base Firebird. Then the Ram Air 4 option added hundreds more. The final price approached $5,000, serious money when the average American worker earned about $8,000 per year. In 1969, that represented serious money. Insurance premiums for high-performance cars were already climbing rapidly. Buyers also faced rising fuel costs and uncertainty about tightening emissions regulations. Many settled for the cheaper Ram Air 3. Few realized what they were giving up. The Ram Air 3 used similar displacement, but featured smaller valves, milder camshaft timing, and the older D-port cylinder heads. It was still a strong engine, rated at 335 horsepower, perfectly adequate for street performance. But it lacked the Ram Air 4's high RPM savagery and sophisticated engineering. The performance gap between them was far wider than the 35 horsepower difference suggested on paper. And then the real nightmare started. The muscle car era reached its peak just as government regulations began closing in. The Clean Air Act demanded lower emissions. High compression engines suddenly became liabilities. Insurance companies started punishing owners of powerful V8s with astronomical premiums. A young driver trying to insure a Ram Air 4 Trans Am could face annual premiums exceeding the car's original purchase price. Premium leaded fuel became increasingly expensive. Gas stations that had sold high-octane racing fuel began discontinuing it. Pontiac's masterpiece had arrived at exactly the wrong moment. By 1970, compression ratios began falling across Detroit. Aggressive camshafts disappeared. Horsepower ratings dropped dramatically. The Ram Air 4 remained available briefly into 1970, but its days were clearly numbered. Production numbers remained tiny. The 1970 model year saw only slightly better sales before emissions regulations and insurance costs made such engines commercially impossible. Soon, the engine vanished forever. Its replacement never truly captured the same magic. The 1971 455 HO produced impressive torque, but lower compression and restrictive exhaust systems neutered the high RPM performance that made the Ram Air 4 special. By 1972, even Pontiac's strongest engines struggled to match the Ram Air 4's real-world performance. The golden age had ended, yet the legend only grew. Engine builders began tearing apart original Ram Air 4 blocks to understand why they performed so well. Flowbench testing confirmed what racers already suspected. Those round port heads ranked among the finest factory castings of the muscle car era. Modern builders still use reproductions because the original design simply worked. Companies like Butler Performance and Kaufman Racing Equipment built entire businesses around Ram Air 4 components and expertise. Collectors noticed too. In the 1980s, surviving Ram Air 4 Trans Ams began climbing sharply in value. Cars that sold for $1,500 in 1975 suddenly commanded $15,000. By the 1990s, pristine examples regularly crossed six figures. Today, documented numbers-matching Ram Air 4 Trans Ams have sold for well over $500,000, while exceptionally rare examples have approached or exceeded $1 million at major collector auctions like Meckham and Barrett-Jackson. Not because they were the fastest, not because they were the loudest, because they represented something incredibly rare, an uncompromising engineering philosophy. Even modern performance enthusiasts continue debating the Ram Air 4 against rivals like Chevrolet's legendary L88 427, Ford's Boss 302, and Chrysler's Street Hemi. Each engine had unique strengths. The Hemi produced incredible top-end power with its hemispherical combustion chambers and race-bred architecture. The Boss 302 excelled on road courses with its high-winding small-block fury and exceptional throttle response. The L88 bordered on full race specification with its 12.5, one compression and aluminum cylinder heads, but the Pontiac stood apart through balance. It combined sophisticated cylinder head design, exceptional durability, broad torque, and remarkable breathing characteristics into one beautifully engineered package. It wasn't simply brute force. It was intelligent horsepower, an engine that rewarded understanding rather than just punishing the throttle. There's another reason the Ram Air 4 remains so respected. It rewarded skilled drivers. Mash the throttle at low RPM and it could feel almost disappointing. Keep the engine spinning in its sweet spot, shift precisely, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The exhaust note hardened from a grumble to a scream. The front end lifted. The Quadrajet's massive secondary barrels swung open with their unmistakable roar. Every gear change felt like another wave crashing into the rear tires. It demanded patience. Then it rewarded courage. That's something modern performance cars often struggle to replicate. Today's engines make enormous power almost effortlessly. Electronic controls smooth every rough edge. Computers compensate for driver mistakes. Variable valve timing, direct injection, and sophisticated engine management systems have made 400 horsepower commonplace and easy. The Ram Air 4 asks something from its owner. It expected you to understand it. You had to learn its power band, respect its temperament, work with it rather than against it. That created a connection between driver and machine that modern cars, for all their superior performance, sometimes lack. Maybe that's why people still talk about it more than half a century later. Most engines become obsolete, some become famous, only a handful become legends. The Ram Air 4 earned that title because it arrived during the final golden moment before emissions regulations, insurance costs, and corporate caution transformed the American muscle car forever. It represented Pontiac engineers operating at the absolute peak of their creativity, squeezing every possible horsepower out of a naturally aspirated pushrod V8 while staying just barely inside the rules. Looking back, the biggest surprise isn't that the Ram Air 4 became collectible. It's that Pontiac managed to build it at all, against corporate restrictions, against looming regulations, against an industry that was already beginning to turn away from raw performance. In many ways, the 1969 Trans Am Ram Air 4 wasn't simply another engine. It was Pontiac's final declaration that engineering passion still mattered more than marketing. That performance couldn't be defined by advertising copy or quarterly sales reports. That somewhere inside a massive corporation, a small group of dedicated engineers could still build something extraordinary simply because they believed it deserved to exist. And for the lucky few who heard one screaming past 6,000 revolutions per minute, that's a sound they'll never forget. The Ram Air 4 proved that horsepower isn't just about bigger numbers. It's about smarter engineering, better airflow, stronger components, and the courage to build something extraordinary even when the world is changing around you. That's why this engine remains one of the greatest hidden masterpieces of the muscle car era. An engine that almost nobody bought, that almost everyone forgot, but that true enthusiasts will never stop celebrating. Because greatness doesn't need mass production, it just needs to exist.